Are you growing your beard out like me, Kevin?
Yeah, a little bit, but I don't have near what you have, I guess. So.
Yeah, if I don't shave for like 2 days.
It was casting, Kevin. I didn't realize you had something going on there.
Yeah, he's going for you going to the mountains soon, Kevin?
Yeah, that's right.
At what age do you start growing facial hair? I'm asking for a
Ross, it takes
My
you a couple
husband
weeks
started
to get a 5
at
o'clock
70,
channel, right?
Ross. 70.
Yeah. At least you've got hair up here, or here, I'm sorry.
Oof.
So Ross, I used to have a really thick beard. Now I've got no facial hair at all. So you can actually go back the other direction too. There's ways to do that. I got through the whole cycle.
Nice.
Like, wow.
You have to show us a photo, Councilmember Seekins. That would be good.
Well, I've got plenty with facial hair. You can see it without. I've got that.
Yeah, no, I've seen it without. I want to see with.
Well, it'll have to be an old vintage one because I don't think it's coming back again. I think last November I grew my beard out for a while. I don't know. I can't ever make it for I can't make it to like the full saccharin right there. I mean, that's pretty thick.
Yeah.
It's getting grayer too.
Well, I am just like you. I'm 100% gray from the temple down. It's like, whoa. Is Amy, I see her workshop up there. Is she here? Amy?
I'm here. I haven't decided to come on video yet.
Are you waiting to see what the crowd looks like before you decide?
Maybe.
I think
Good answer. Good answer.
I think we're just waiting on a few more people, and then we'll
Amy,
start.
it looks like a very friendly crowd. Look at the smiles and everything. It's amazing.
How is the honor awards? Did anyone go with the mayor? City Hall?
They were great.
Good. I'm sorry to miss.
Howdy, everyone.
Hello, Mayor.
Hello.
Good afternoon. All right.
And Mayor, we are waiting on council members Mitchell, Gregory, Waring, and Shade. But we do have Councilwoman Del Chapo, council members Shealy, Saccharin, Brady, Seekins, Griffin, L, and Councilwoman Jackson. Actually, Councilmember Shade is signing on now.
Oh, great. We'll just wait another minute or two, and then we'll be able to get started. See if they sign on. I hope everyone's having a nice, cool, beautiful day here in Charleston. It's lovely out.
Freezing.
I love it.
I got my hot tea.
Oh, goodness gracious.
It's
I was going to say Ross has it being
freezing in
sweating
Maryland.
season.
Below freezing.
Oh.
So,
So, Peter, I'll be holding my cup of tea rather than the dog.
Yeah, I see that. This is a beautiful summer day in Maine. Come on now.
it was a little cool when I went on my morning walk this morning. I think everybody on council knows, but just in case, we do plan on opening a warming shelter at the Arthur Christopher Gym. I think 36 degrees is our kind of touch point for opening up. So I don't see that on the forecast just yet, but it probably won't be too long, and we'll be opening up for the first time. Our emergency management staff and Christopher Jordan, our homeless coordinator, have worked very hard to put the effort together. It will rely a bit on city staff, but also on volunteerism. We've contacted another number of churches who have volunteered to offer volunteers to us, kind of a week at a time, depending on how the weather goes, of course. So I can get you more on that. We're gearing up for being able to serve those who don't have a warm place to stay when it gets really cold. I do see Councilmember Mitchell joined us.
Yes, I'm here.
Sir. So
Okay.
I think that leaves us shy of Council Members Gregory and Waring.
Correct.
So I'd suggest we go ahead and get started. They're both on, I hear somebody else coming in, but they're both on the ad hoc committee. So frankly, they've heard most of this already. And if I could call us to order, I don't think we need to call a roll. Jennifer's got good track of who's here. I'd ask you to just join me for a moment of silence as we reflect upon both the leadership of the city and our country and the decisions that we have to make to be good stewards of the city going forward. Thank you. May God guide us in our deliberations. So most of this show, as you would expect, is put together by Amy Wharton, our highly capable Director of Budget and Finance. She's really done a terrific job here today. I've seen a preview telling the history of how we got where we are and decisions that need to be made by council. I will just add, as I think I did at the beginning of our last ad hoc budget committee meeting, that primarily we have a challenge on the income side, and not so much on the expense side. And in that regard, I want to thank Amy and all her budget analysts and staff, along with our department heads, who this budget year in particular, upon direction and with collaboration and cooperation, have really looked into all of their operating budgets in order to cut expenses and keep things trim. In addition, we've now gone through this year with a hiring freeze in place. And as we've let them all know, we need to continue that for the coming year as well. So honestly, a lot of positions and help that some of our departments have been looking forward to getting after a few years without, they'll have to continue on. So there's definitely been a great cooperative effort among our staff to make ends meet on this budget with sacrifices by all. I will say I've been a little optimistic, maybe overly so, over the last few months, that the Congress and the administration, the Trump administration, was going to, so to speak, come to our rescue on the income side. As you all know, the Early CARES Act provided relief to local governments, but only if you had 500,000 or more in your jurisdiction. So in South Carolina, Greenville County was the only jurisdiction to qualify and get some of those direct CARES fund funding. So some good intentions on the part of Congress. The House passed a bill, I guess it was during the summer. And unfortunately, given the political climate, a compromise was never reached between them and the Senate, even with President Trump saying that he wanted to have a bill come forward before the election. Now we have a new president-elect, Joe Biden, who earlier this week emphasized the need to provide more help to state and local governments facing a budget crunch as a result of the pandemic. And he was actually quoted on Monday as saying, "You're going to see hundreds of thousands of police officers, firefighters, first responders, mental health clinics, others. You're going to see them going out of business if a COVID relief package like HEROES is not passed. So he is now on board as well and asking the Congress during, I guess, what you call a lame duck session here to try to compromise and get a HEROES Act together that would provide some relief to local government like ourselves. So I spent a little time prefacing that or commenting on that. We talked about this at the last ad hoc budget committee meeting, because even though you'll see, in order to make ends meet in this budget, we do look at some adjustments on our property tax millage, still below what it was last year, admittedly before the reassessment, but still below that figure, but more than it is now. And we don't have to send that information to the county auditor until next September for it to actually be included in next year's tax bill. So we do have some time here, some cushion. Again, I'm going to be optimistic with things as they are now, that we will see some relief from the federal government and be able to make some adjustments to our income side of the budget, and like we did this year, have a budget amendment for 2021 that could take these things into account. But we got to deal with what we got right now. What we know about is on the table, and that's what Amy's going to tell us about. And we got to make it work. We got to have a balanced budget, regardless of what might happen next year. We'll just have to cross that bridge when we get there if something good happens, but I hope it will. So anyway, with that backdrop, I will now ask Amy to give you her fine presentation. Amy?
Good afternoon, everyone.
All right. How you doing, Amy?
Everybody can hear me okay?
Hey, Amy.
Hi.
Loud and clear, Amy.
Okay, good. So we're just go over the draft, the 2021 draft general fund and enterprise fund budgets first, and then the draft tourism fund budgets. And then I have just some additional information that some council members had asked for at the end of the presentation. So general fund and enterprise funds are draft budget highlights. We began meeting actually earlier than normal, the ad hoc committee, because of our 2020 budgetary constraints, because of the pandemic and the revenue losses. For 2021 budgets, the departmental budgets were due in early July. The total of all the additional requests above their base budgets was around 9.9 million. You know, in prior years, we've had up to $27 million in additional requests from the department. So they really did try hard to keep things down. But as we were looking at their projected revenues, we knew that the budget could not even support their base budget. So we asked them to go back and reduce their 2020 base budgets by 10%. They came back with $1.78 million in cuts. We went through and made an additional $4.4 million in cuts. And then there were some high priority requests that we did add back into the budget in the amount of $3 million. Some of it was IT related that we needed to do. Another example would be the body worn cameras for the police department. We have to replace those every 2 years. And obviously we need our officers to have cameras. So we added those back in. And then we looked at some revenues again and reassessed them and increased them. The main revenue that we're talking about there is business licenses. When we first looked at it, we were projecting about a $9 million decrease in revenues for 2021. But as we were getting more information in October and we had our code enforcement officers out there doing some assessments of the businesses, we felt a little bit more comfortable adding a couple more million to that. So overall, it's a $7 million increase or decrease from 2020. And at that point, we still had a deficit of $14.6 million. We considered a furlough pay reduction for our employees. It would have resulted in a reduction in expenditures of around 2.1 million. There's a lot of concern with this. Reducing pay might inspire more employees to leave city employment because there are still jobs out there, unlike in the recession before. There's still jobs out there that people could go to. And with the hiring freeze extending into 2021, we are concerned of employee morale and the ability to maintain service levels efficiently and effectively. We had to take a hard look at revenues and a property tax, God bless you.
Thank you.
Property tax increase to balance the budget was considered. So ad hoc, we gave them several options to close the $14.6 million gap. And what we're presenting to you right now and what I sent to you yesterday is the result, is the budget that came from those discussions. So this budget includes a millage increase of 3 mills, which equates to about $4.9 million. It also includes the city keeping 50% of the local option sales tax municipal revenue fund, which equates to about $4.1 million. This allowed us to not have to furlough or implement pay reductions for employees. It does not include a COLA for employees, or we were not able to increase the city's minimum wage either. So whereas they will not be furloughed or a pay reduction, there is no increase for them in this budget this year or for next year. And we also still had to utilize $5.2 million in fund balance in order to balance the budget. So just looking at some trends, some budget trends for our general fund budget revenues versus total expenditures, you can see that our expenditures are still outpacing revenues, but you can see how 2021 compares to 2020. And then our proposed budgets, the enterprise fund, the total projected revenue is about $34.4 million, projected expenses at 30.1, with a surplus of almost $4.3 million. And just as an additional note, the surplus that we had in 2020 was budgeted at $11 million. And we use that to balance our budget every year. So you can see how much of a difference there is from 20 to 21. Our proposed general fund, total projected revenues is around 197.6 million. Projected expenses at 207 million, a deficit of 9.5 million, using fund balance of almost 5.3 million and transfers in from the enterprise funds for that surplus that we had at 4.2. That's how we come to a balanced budget. Combined general fund and enterprise fund revenue budget is $232 million. 2020 approved budget was almost $238 million. There's a net increase in revenues in the general fund of 2.7 million and a net decrease in revenues in the enterprise fund of 8.5, mostly attributed to the decrease in parking fund revenues. And then just looking at growth, major revenue growth by category, most of the revenues decrease in revenue due to the COVID impact. Increase in property taxes is due to the 3 mil increase and the reduction in lost revenue fund credit given, and also growth from reassessment in 2020. The biggest decreases were in licenses, permits, and fees in the state of South Carolina. And interest income was also significantly less by 1.2 million. So you can see the only thing that increased is property taxes, everything else is down. So combined general fund and enterprise funds expenditure budget is 237 million. Approved budget was also almost 238 million in 2020. A minimal net decrease in overall expenditures of 532,000. There's a $1.1 million increase in expenditures from 2020 to 2021 in the general fund. And those are mostly attributed to the increase in healthcare and anticipated retirement increases. We had a $1.7 million decrease in expenditures from 20 to 21 in the enterprise fund. And just looking at this, you can see personnel, fringe benefits, and operating. The increase of 1.1 million, as I stated on the previous slide. Personnel is not growing due to no COLA or increases to minimum wage. Operating has basically flatlined for 2021 as compared to 2020, and fringes increased because of healthcare and the retirement increases.
Amy,
Yes.
can you go back to the previous slide?
Sure.
Yeah. If we looked at the 220 budget and the 221 budget, there's basically the same? I'm asking.
Yeah, so yes, that's the expenditure budget for general fund and enterprise fund combined.
Right. So if I were to say, where's the cuts in 21 versus 20, how would you answer that?
Well, we had some increases because of healthcare and retirement. We added back the $3 million in high priority requests. That's really where it lies.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
And then parking surplus versus the transfer to the general fund. In 2020, like I said, the budgeted transfer was $11 million. In 2020, we're not able to do any of that transfer. You'll see that in the amended budget that we did. So we had to cover that in other areas. And then in 2021, it's 4.3 million. Is there any questions on that?
Yeah, I got a couple of general questions. Do we have a feel for, I guess, enterprise revenue, for the last quarter, or basically how we finishing out the year versus, March, April, May?
We do.
I mean, what's the trend? Is it flat or is it beginning to increase a little bit?
Well, we saw increases some, but we are expecting some of it to flatline or decrease towards the end of the year. And now with the cases being higher, we're not exactly sure what's happening, but they were starting to increase, but we're expecting November, December for them to decrease a little bit or to flatten.
Got you. Understood. Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions before we go on? Councilmember Saccharin?
Thank you, Mayor. Amy, are you? I don't want to ask if you've got additional presentation. Are you going to continue?
Yeah, I'm just talking about tourism budgets next. So if you have any questions about general fund and enterprise.
Yeah, I guess just general questions for me that I've been asked. When was the last time we did approve a millage increase as a city?
The last time was it 2 years ago? We did 1.5 for the operating budget and 1.5 for public safety infrastructure.
Okay, and then what's left in the fund balance if we were to approve the current proposal right now? What would be left in that fund balance?
So I've maintained our 20%. That was above the 20% that we're required to maintain. So we could use up to $6 million in fund balance and still maintain our 20% requirement.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So using 5.2 of the 6, we didn't leave a big cushion there, just another 800,000.
That's right. Any other questions? Okay.
Well, I do, Amy, for me. I don't know if this is a point, or maybe Mr. Mayor at the end of the meeting, but we all have hope, prayers, and everything else. Hoping some sort of stimulus aspect for local government is approved sometime in the turn of the year. How do we? Somehow coming out of this, I think we ought to commit that if we get some of those funds, is to go back to the lost side of revenue that we, the 50% or loss that we didn't give back. That if we did get stimulus money, we can return the lost revenue to the citizens.
Right. So, council member, you might have been just a couple of minutes late signing on because
right.
I recounted at the very opening of the meeting that we discussed this at our last ad hoc budget committee meeting, and that we would have until next September truly to make an adjustment before the millage gets reported to the auditor. And if we're blessed to get some relief, as everybody seems to finally be on board now to do, we would certainly consider that and be able to make adjustments.
Okay.
And you have my commitment that that's what we'll do first. is look at those revenue sources. Of course, we got to see how flexible the CARES funding is when it comes to us. You know, even
Right.
money they sent to the state earlier this year was very restrictive. But I believe, I know the House version that passed earlier this year was able to replace lost revenue. And so if that's the case if they keep that provision in there, we really will have the flexibility to just kind of add it to our general fund pot and be able to take a new look at our revenue sources.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Right. Councilmember Seekins?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have the same question, but about the local option sales tax rollback. If we do that, do we still have flexibility in the first 2/3 of next year to change that? Or, I mean, that I think we have to sort of put in there right away, right?
Same time frame. We let the auditor know at the same time we give them the millage, we give them what our percentage of the LOST would be as well. So basically, we've got until next September.
And that's when we tell them how much of whatever the lost money is to apply to property tax relief?
That's correct.
We set both the millage and the local option tax credit at the same time.
That's right.
And then I mentioned as well too that we have a resolution that will be going on November 24th, coming Tuesday, for the local option sales tax to change that as well.
And I think this, to Councilmember Saccharin's point, we did increase millage a couple of years ago, but we've always, I think in our history, applied 100% of lost monies to property tax relief, right?
That's correct.
That's correct, which is unlike most of our neighboring jurisdictions, but that's what the city of Charleston has always done.
Thanks.
Councilmember Griffin and Gregory.
Just two questions. Number one, that millage increase that we did 2 years ago, that was a stormwater millage increase, wasn't it?
No. It was 1.5 for the operating, and it was 1.5 for public safety infrastructure.
Okay, how much, can you go back to that slide one more time? I mean, how much money is this millage increase going to generate?
The millage will be 4.9 million, and the local option sales tax is 4.1, so it's around $9 million.
Okay, so the property tax will be 4.9.
The millage, right, and the local option sales tax will generate 4.1.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Gregory.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about the rollback just a bit, because I think, you know, in our ad hoc committee meetings, we also discuss it. And I don't have a problem with considering anything, but I just want, as we do that, as we normally do, we consider it being informed of what our projections may be in 2022. And we right now, we really, it's the unknown. So as we consider any kind of rollback option, I just want us to make sure that we'll be able to make our projections for 2020 if we had the ability to do that.
Now you said 2020. What year you
I mean 2022.
2022.
Sorry.
All right.
2022. Projections for 2022. You know, I don't have a problem with considering it, but I think that as we consider it, we just need to make sure that we know where we're headed in 2022.
Right. Well, I agree with that. I must say that the biggest hits on our income are to parking revenue, which is reliant upon, you know, tourism and the general economy. Number one. Number two is business license income, which, as Amy said, we're projecting to be $7 million short of what we would have normally anticipated for next year, which is also a function of the general economic environment. And third would be both accommodations and hospitality taxes. So those are the three pots of money that all took big hits this year in 2020, and we're projecting hits for 2021. Of course, the business license actually didn't hit a loss until 2021 because we were riding on last year's gross income projections, right? So you're right, Councilmember Gregory. It is unknown. I certainly would feel that by third quarter of next year, we would have a reasonable feel for how those variable income sources would be. And obviously, if our economy and tourism is starting to recover, all those those funding sources will recover as well. So you're right. We'll look at those things when we get there. Before we get there, I mean. Any other questions or comments about general fund, enterprise fund, either on the income or the expense side?
Well, I don't have a question, Mr. Mayor. I do have an observation to share. As you know, and council members who've been on a little bit longer, in the past when we have had millage increases and continued to give all of the lost money back to the taxpayers to reduce taxes, property taxes, usually in about maybe 2 years or so, believe it or not, that increase is usually superseded by lost revenue back to the homeowner. So that's been the trend, I would say. That's what that increase is normally given back a couple of years later, because lost revenue during normal times has been growing from one year to the next. So that's why it's worked out so well. So hopefully when the economy restores itself, 21, 22, whenever, we get back on that track that we've been on in the past.
That's right. That's absolutely right. And that, of course, is somewhat relying on the sales tax, which again is relying on the general economy. Right. So once again, everything we can do financially to get back to normal, the better. Councilmember
Right.
Shade?
Mr. Mayor, I think in your opening comments about the a new administration and what a new Congress may pass, and I think I asked this question at our workshop meeting, and Mr. Drew provided us some insight. But I think it's just very clear that the funds that they were discussing back in those early discussions in the spring and summer of this year, those monies, if passed, would cover this shortfall. And I think you kind of alluded to it, but I think it's also just very important that we're absolutely clear that if that bill had been passed, the money that we would have received would have been more than sufficient to cover this shortfall.
Right. I think I was quoted as saying if that thing had passed, we wouldn't be having this discussion. Right. And I mentally figured it out today that if just 20% of what the House passed comes through to us, we would have no need for a millage increase or adjustment to the LOST. Just 20% of what the House already passed and the others didn't agree to. But so I got to believe that they'll compromise at least to that point. We'll see. It's all speculative. Councilmember Griffin.
And I said in our last budget workshop that, we've got to expect the worst. So we can't, unfortunately, the federal government is a lot harder to deal with. And the way things are today, we just don't know what's going to happen. We have no idea.
That's right.
Question is, at the last budget workshop, Amy, I asked if we had looked at our properties and seen if there may be a property or two that might be, very valuable that we can move back to the private sector. Have we looked at all into that, doing that?
We have not. We don't have current appraisals on all of our properties, Councilmember Griffin. It would take us a while to get that done. But again, that's, one-time revenue that we'd be using for ongoing expenses as well.
Well, my whole thought process is if you ask our constituents, would y'all rather pay a tax increase or sell, a piece of property? They would probably sell a piece of property, because at the end of the day, we're going to have to reach in their pockets when they've struggled just as much as we have, if not more, in the private sector. So I would just hope that we would look at all possible alternatives. That's why I asked that.
Well, that's, it is a good point, council member. I would point out that we are not property rich. I mean, and I don't think it's the intent of the city or our citizens to literally sell an existing park or anything like that. And I don't think you meant that. But just for an example, we know we're going to have to relocate our public service facility on Milford Street based upon an arrangement, a deal that was made 10 or 15 years ago. And we've known already that we don't have enough property to relocate all those functions. And so frankly, in a few cases, we're out looking for property to buy right now that we need. So I don't think there's a big excess inventory, but Councilmember Waring and I did pick up on your suggestion, and through a partner of ours, we are exploring an option like that, but more to come on that depending on what happens. All right. Any more questions, comments? Councilmember Saccharin?
Thank you, Mayor. Another question about the process itself. I know in ad hoc, my guess is that folks get a chance to look and dive deep into the budget requests made by different departments. Is that
Correct.
something that we are privy to? I mean, I'd love to be able to see some of the requests and that departments make for additional personnel or staff, or vice versa. Some of the departments that we may feel maybe are top heavy, and I'll just say that. But I do know that there's been several departments that have made requests for additional staff that have not been approved. So what's the best way to get that information?
We'll send it to you.
Okay.
And yes, it absolutely is available line by line. All right. Any other comments? We can go on to our tourism and tourism related taxes, I think, next, or maybe the schedule.
So the reading of this budget is on December 1st for your approval. And like I said, the resolution to change our the local option sales tax will be at on Tuesday's agenda as well. And we will bring the stormwater fund budget to you on the 15th meeting of December.
Amy, I have a question about that. If we don't have to notify the county until next September about our decision on local option sales, why do we have to have that resolution in advance of giving the entire budget a conversation at the same time?
As part of the ordinance, the revenue ordinance. You have to include it in the revenue ordinance as part of the revenue. So we would need the resolution because it was originally 100% give back. So we're changing that. So we need to have it included in the ordinance.
So what happens if that fails to your budget?
Then I don't have a budget, basically.
Well, I mean, there is some chance of that. I mean, is there a plan B?
Well, that's why I was asking if there's any questions, concerns today so that we could talk about them. There is no plan B right now, no.
So this is assuming that council is going to vote for a rollback of the local option sales tax of 50%.
That's correct.
Yeah, so we have a certain limit that we can increase the millage. They call it a bank, if I'm not mistaken, a millage bank. And we can raise the millage a little more, but I think 0.6 mils more, which would only make up an additional close to $1 million. So, you know, we just have to recast our revenue. We'd have to go back to looking at furloughs and laying off employees, I think, at that point, which is something we would like not to do. And even though, again, it may seem, I agree with Councilmember Griffin, we gotta pass a budget based on what we know right now, but I certainly am hopeful we can make adjustments next year. Councilmember Del Chapo?
Well, I don't like the assumption that this is going to pass, because I'm not afraid to say it. I'm not in support of this. I don't think that we should be increasing the millage, and I don't think we should be keeping half of the local option sales tax. This will hurt our small businesses. It'll hurt people who rent. It'll hurt property owners. It'll hurt people across the board. And I also, I also don't believe in waiting on a handout. You know, this speculation of when the feds come through, we can't rely upon that. I think that if you go through this budget line by line, and I'm not saying that, you know, appropriate care hasn't been given, but you can see off the bat some things that our constituents do not need. And I think that needs to be very carefully tended to, of what can we cut back on for a year or two, or do without for a year or two, so we don't kick people when they're down. And to me, coming and telling someone, you know, we're increasing your taxes in the midst of all of this is adding salt to a wound. So I don't like the assumption that this will pass. I think that's putting the cart before the horse, and want to see something else.
Well,
And I'm happy to go through this line by line if that's what we need to do, because that's how it is our responsibility, as was said in the very beginning, to be good stewards to our citizens, and they work their tails off for every penny that they make, and we need to honor that and be respectful of it. So if we need to take the time to do that, then that's what we need to do.
Well, I hear you. I respect that. I also would respectfully say that I believe we are being good stewards and very balanced about the proposal, given that we've had hiring freeze in effect for a year and keeping that in place for another year, and no cost of living adjustments and reductions by all departments. We're certainly fine for you to look through line by line and make any suggestions that you think appropriate. That'd be fine. And in addition to the Councilmember Saccharin, we'll send that to everyone. Be interested to get your input. We feel like we're at a point, after asking our department heads to look through their budgets, make reductions, and the budget and finance staff made additional reductions. We're at the point where you know, we'd be laying employees off. And we need to be able to provide those services. But I'm open to any suggestions you've got. Look at the line by line budget. And
well, I think it's incumbent upon us to do what the citizens of Charleston need. And if there's things that they do not need or wouldn't even notice if they were gone, which there are things, then we need to honor that. I just, you know, I can't go to my folks and tell them, hey, guess what? You're going to have to pay more to get the same level of service, if not worse, when all I hear is how level of service continues to deteriorate. And I certainly experience it myself. But now we're going to charge people more to get less. You know, if you walked into a store and they were going to charge you more to give you less, you'd walk right out. You know, I think it's cutting off our nose to spite our face.
Council, I hear it. I'll look forward to your recommendation. Councilmember Seeking.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, I think this whole conversation, you know, points up one of the great difficulties of all this and one of the conundrums that we're going to face, but it also points up something that we really should be talking about, I think, and incorporate into this conversation at the full council level. one of the things that you've been a part of and we've been working on most of the summer, and that is the King Street Corridor Initiative, and every Friday afternoon for an hour and a half, talking about jumpstarting and reviving an area of the city that I think most of us at least agree is, if not the one of the principal economic drivers of this city. And we're really in partnership with them because you pointed out that our budget is directly tied into the success of our businesses. And the number one issue that was brought up by everybody in that corridor was it's too expensive to do business on King Street. I mean, we heard that a lot, that we've priced ourselves out of the market. Local businesses have been tough to get in there. And, you know, one of the things we have to do is work for a way to get to some equities on rents and the like, so we can jumpstart and revive and do all the things we do in that corridor. That's been a constant theme every single week that we've sat in on those meetings. And when we start rolling back local option sales taxes and raising property taxes, particularly in that corridor, we're going the exact opposite direction, because that will all flow through from property owner to business that's occupying, which is mostly renters. And I just think it's a huge conundrum that, you know, when we get this budget, those of us who are on the committee have to go back and sort of talk to our constituency, particularly that corridor, and explain this. It's going to prompt some legitimate questions. And I think that, you know, to give Amy a signal that we're automatically going to go vote for a rollback of loss and a property tax increase when we've had the King Street corridor, among other places, tell us that, you know, as the cost of doing business goes up, the chances of us bringing people back onto the street goes down. That's problematic. So it's all tied in. I get it. And we have to do what's best. And we know we have to have a balanced budget, but I think we need to think about issues like that. And that's not the only corridor in the city that's going to need some jump starting and some help. I mean, we've, you know, got the Citadel Mall sitting there laying in wait to go. And again, the more the taxes go up, the less it is attractive for business to go in. Affordable housing gets more expensive the more you carry costs on properties are. So, you know, by my calculation, the way that we're getting to this budget without, and I think someone asked the question early, I think it was Councilmember Waring's, like if someone asks us what the difference between the 2020 budget is in terms of cuts, there really isn't much. I wrote down $535,000 of difference. So we've got about the same amount of revenues and in there and the same amount of expenditures. You know, we're looking at a $6 million property tax increase total between lost and the millage that we're putting in there. And that's going to be one that's going to be tough to explain without a little bit more discussion about that to those who are trying to get out there and jumpstart what we now know is the core of our economy, tourism and the retail business. So it's a long answer saying we've got some challenges. And I mean, as I went through this budget, got it yesterday, thinking about some of the things that council members have talked about, I think we probably do owe it to ourselves collectively to at least go back and look again and see if there's some things we can do to ease that pain so we can do the very thing that we said we wanted to do, which was jumpstart the local economy. And that's the conundrum that I think we all face.
Right, understood. Councilmember Appel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I think this is a very important discussion that we're having today. I mean, none of us, ran for office and signed up for this job to raise taxes on people. This is not what anybody wants to be doing right now. But obviously, we're under an extreme duress that is not of our making, and we're having to make these tough choices. And I've sat in the budget ad hoc meetings. I think that it's a great idea to get everybody up to speed on the details here, because this is a big gap that we have to close. We all know we're not touching the police budget. We all know we're not touching the fire budget. We know we're not touching the stormwater budget. We know we're not touching the public works and trash pickup budget. And when you put all that stuff off to the side, there's not a whole lot left to pick and poke at. And if there is a proposal of cuts that we can make that in lieu of these tax increases, I am the first one to entertain it and to look at it. I just think the devil is in the details here, and that without, fully, acknowledging the costs and benefits of what we have on the table here, this is just a philosophical discussion that is not really connected to the real reality of what our budget is and the services we provide and what we need to do. I mean, it reminds me of, remember when people in DC were like concerned about the budget and the deficit? Remember when they used to talk about that? And they used to talk a whole lot about like cutting, funding for PBS and stuff, like as if that would close the gap. That is what I think we're going to find once we start pulling out the budget and start going line by line. Because we all know we're not defunding the police or fire department in this city. And we all know how substantial that portion of our budget is. And I just don't know where these cuts are going to come from. If there are cuts that we can make that our constituents are going to be okay with, let's look at it. But that work needs to get going. This is all information that's publicly available, and we can look at. And I'd welcome proposals from the folks on council that are opposed to these increases on alternatives, because at the end of the day, unlike the federal government, we have to balance our budget. We can't run deficits. We can't print money. We have to run a tight ship, and we've been running a tight ship in the city of Charleston for years. That's how we were able to close, the $42 million budget shortfall this year when North Charleston had to lay off people, when other governments weren't able to close the budget gap without raising taxes. But we can only take so much. The city of Charleston can only take so much given the constraints that we're under and the services that we have to provide. So I would just close by saying we need to pivot as a council from sort of broad philosophical talk to real specifics on what we're going to do, because again, the devil's in the details.
All right, thank you. I think Councilmember Gregory had his hand up next. Shade, Griffin, and Waring.
Yes, Councilmember Del Chapo, you remind me of me, my first or second year, where I did what you said you're going to do. I literally went through the budget line by line, actually hiring people to help me, okay? And after going through it line by line, I ended up at the same place where the recommendations were. So I applaud you if that is something that you want to undertake, but it is more than a notion. And you just being a part of the, pardon? I'm sorry.
I mean, I just look at some things like what people, the stipend to park, it just blows my mind.
No, I understand. I mean, the point I'm making is that when I looked at it, the circumstances were totally different than they are today. And I would just like to echo what Councilman Appel said. As we went through the various options, and I'm sure that our CFO will share that with you. We didn't just end up here. We went through 3 or 4 or 5 different iterations of the budget, all of which had very different outcomes. And in doing so, the ad hoc committee concluded that this was the best of the bunch because, one, it protected our number one priority, which is public safety. We don't have to touch them, okay? I don't want to reiterate what Councilman Appel said, because he's absolutely correct. I mean, there are just certain things, okay, that are just set that will not be touched or cut. And the rest of it, these guys are already bare boned. We have departments that have been experiencing a hiring freeze for some time, but still continue to deliver, I think, the best that they can, given the circumstances. So I'm saying all this to say that this is a totally different time than when I first looked at the budget line by line. And I do think that what the ad hoc committee went through to get to this point is probably exactly what you will probably have to go through in order to determine why we think this is a good budget for the mayor to present.
All right, Councilmember, thank you. Councilmember Shade, and then Griffin and Waring.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm going to tell you, I hate doing this. This is the absolute last thing that I want to vote for on increasing that millage or the local sales option tax. And we've had these discussions before, and I resisted any discussions about the local option sales tax and our citizens not getting 100% of that credit back to them. It makes a huge difference on all of this. We created this budget ad hoc committee several years ago. Councilmember Waring and I and the mayor have been on that since the inception. And we can share this experience with you. When we review these budgets, even during the times that we had good revenue coming in, we weren't worried about COVID-19, we weren't worried about business licenses, income going down or parking fees going down. Even in the best of times that we've had and since I've been on council, we have not granted a full funding of the budgets requested by our departments. We have deferred constantly, year after year, things such as maintenance on some of our facilities. We have run a very tight budget. So even in the best of times, even in the absolute best of times, we had this word of deferral, and we were kicking the can down the street, literally year after year, on what these departments wanted. We have never been, and I hate to use this word, fully funding, that may be a bad analogy, but we never gave each department head all that they wanted. We have asked them to go back time after time to say, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to wait and bring that to us next year, or we'll partially fund some of these things. When we talk about our options in doing these furloughs, our options are very clearly, and I think some of us said this, some of our options on this are furloughs or firing people. That's the bottom line. That's just what it is. If we did a furlough, it would have to be across the board. If we furlough firemen, we can't leave that station house unattended. So if we furlough a particular fireman, we have to bring in another fireman to come in to cover that and pay him overtime, which will be an increase in our expenditure, not a decrease, not a savings. If we fire police officers, we're not going to cover areas that we need to cover in our city. About 90% of the police budget, I think police and fire, the budget, is personnel. Put this all in perspective a little bit. I'm looking at the 2020 budget that we passed a year ago. And I pulled this off of our website. Our property taxes revenue from 2020 were right around $90 million. $90 million in revenue from our property taxes. Our public safety budget alone gobbled all of that up. It was $103 million. So you have to have some of these numbers in perspective to understand where our expenditures are. Our expenditures are not in recreation. It's not in general operating expenses. Our expenses are public safety. And when you start talking about cutting, unless you eliminate an entire department completely, and we don't have that function anymore, unless you ready, and this is the word we're going to have to use. This is the word we have to tell people. We're defunding the police. We're going to have to defund the police in order to make this budget work. So here's our choice, and it's a Hobson's choice that I don't want to make, and I don't want to vote for this way. But we've got an obligation to the community to say to them, this is what we have to do. And I agree with everybody. We have to take this budget on the assumption and the reality that we may not get any help from anybody else. We're not getting help from the federal government or the state government or any other thing that's going to take place. We're going to have to pass this budget with the idea of a $3 million increase in the 50% of the local option sales tax not being refunded. That's a reality that we're going to have to talk about. But our backs are against the wall with all of this. And we don't have a choice. There's no other line item to cut. We've already cut 10% from every department to get it to the point that we're at. We've already balanced with a shortfall between $40 or $42 million in expected revenues for our 2020 budget. We came out of that okay with a triple A rating, which was a miracle. I mean, the credit to the finance department for doing that is just something I can't have enough adjectives to explain how they were able to do that. I don't like doing this. And if I had my preference, I would find another option to do it. But and here we are. We don't have many other choices. If there were, I'd be the first person to be standing up there, hitting my wooden spoon against the lid of a tin garbage can saying, folks, come join us on doing it this way instead. But we really just don't have any other options with all of this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Well, thank you. And let me just offer that, you know, the ad hoc committee members have really had an extra layer of scrutiny of all of this, including the expense side. And if council would like to have another workshop where we just focus on the expense side and go department by department and share with you, you know, some of the decisions that were made over the last 6 months, I am happy to do that before we get to December 1. Councilmember Griffin.
Yes, sir. Just responded to Councilmember Appel and Councilmember Shea saying, come up with another idea. Sell the Volvo Car Stadium and sell Joe Riley Park. I mean, we don't need to be in control of those. Sell them. That's what I'm saying. There is another option, and we're not looking at it. I understand we're saying that's a one-time benefit, but this is a one-time pandemic. We haven't had a pandemic like this ever in our lifetimes. And I can promise you that our citizens don't want to see us owning stadiums. They'd much rather see us sell them than ask them for a property tax increase.
All right, Councilmember Waring, and then Jackson.
Thank you. Believe me, I feel your pain, Councilman El Chapo and Councilman Seekins, because he's been here actually longer than I. But I thought about a council person who was on council who needed a fire station and needed this is when Mayor Riley was mayor, and needed a hook and ladder fire truck. Went to a homeowners association meeting. The mayor suggested a $1.5 million tax increase, and there were 60 people that turned out to the homeowners association. All 60 of them was against the tax increase. That council person, mind now, the fire station and the hook and ladder fire truck was in that fire station, in that council person's district. So the people that voted against the fire station being built, it was in their neighborhood. They were against it. They were against the tax increase, no new taxes. That person voted against the tax increase. Mayor Riley brought it to council. With all of his 36 plus years experience, it passed 7-6 by one vote. Okay. That person voted against it, and that person is no longer on council. The same people that came out and said no new taxes, they love the fire station they got now. They love the hook and ladder fire truck that's out there. I told that council person at the time, I said, listen, you got to do what you think is right. And I'm not saying that person didn't do what was right, but you have to do what is right for the people. At that time, the closest hook and ladder fire truck was in Avondale. And 3-story buildings were being built 12 minutes away. So if you're on the 3rd story and the fire is at your back, you can't wait 12 minutes for the hook and ladder fire truck to get there. About 45 cents out of every dollar out of this city comes from property that it takes to run this city comes from property taxes. About 55 cents out of every dollar comes from some sort of fee, parking, hospitality, business license fees, etc. So if your fee income is devastated, and that's what's happening, and we don't have an expense problem. And if you say, well, prove that to me. I'm from Missouri. 10 years ago during the Great Recession, the city had just short of 2,000 employees, 1,970. 10 years later, we've got 1,700 and I think 39 employees. 10 years later, we've got less employees. Oh, let's call it about 140, 150 less employees to run this city. And we've got about 30,000 more people to serve. So we really don't have an expense problem. It really is on the income side. And if you were to say, oh, there's some fat there, and I'll tell you where I think some fat is on this budget. I think some of the fat is in the medical benefits. But then you're looking at trimming, and we're just about closing the open season on the medical benefits. But if you did, then you're looking at cutting medical benefits during a pandemic. I don't know that we want to go down that path either. So, and the mayor's right. There is an extra layer when you're on the budget ad hoc committee, and it may be best if, like the mayor said, we have another workshop, so some of those other items that we have had the advantage of drilling down on, you get to see as well, or those who are not on get to see as well. And when Councilman Gregory said that part about his first year or two on council, let me tell you, that ain't true. He was on council 6 or 7 years, still saying the same thing. No new taxes.
You're right.
he was on council a lot longer than that, saying the same thing. So, and I know it's not funny, but I mean, in jest, I know other council people, including you two, we have worked harder on this budget than I know I worked in my own business. I say that to my wife a couple of times. I said, man, this is the hardest year, and I'm in my 9th year. We've always had additional money year over year, but to go and have a reduction in income, Councilman Appel is right, and others have said it. The piece about selling, let's take Raleigh Stadium. Then you get back to the quality of life. That baseball team, when it's, obviously it's stricken by COVID also, but that's probably one of the best family buys in the Low Country. For a family to go to a baseball game and not rip up hundreds of thousands of dollars to simply get into the park to share family fun. So we might get one-time money doing that, but I'm willing to bet if you put that on a referendum, it wouldn't pass, because how much fun throughout the summer families have going to that park. So, but it really comes down to is how many people on council, and this would be a big help to Amy, how many people on council are willing to vote to cut employees or furlough employees? And if a majority of council wants to go that way, that'll give more clarity to Amy. But if we're not willing to, if a majority of council is not willing to cut employees and furlough employees, then as Councilman Gregory said, we're going to be right back to what we're doing right now. And that's, I think, I have never voted to reduce the lost revenue. And the reason I've never voted to reduce the lost revenue is because when we have increased the millage, that increase in lost revenue tended to offset that increase for the taxpayers. The tremendous benefit when the sales tax increases, and although you increased it and they got a credit, if you will, that reduced the very increase we just did. Well, this will be the first time that I will vote for that. And if my constituents come up and ask me, why in the heck did you do that? I would tell them that the majority of our employees, frankly, are overworked and, in my opinion, underpaid. So are there exceptions out there? Of course. I mean, when you got a person on the back of a sanitation truck getting paid less than $15 an hour, it's hard to say that that person's overpaid. We still got employees that still work for this city full time that doesn't have a livable wage. Yeah, we're trying to get there. We can't get there this year, but we certainly have the process in place to get them there. So it is a little bit unfair that we have had the additional information, and we've actually gone to the point of in the movie American President, they had this guy named Dave that came in, CPA, and went through the federal budget, cutting this and cutting that. We actually have done that, and I'm telling you, to say that there's no fat there, I won't say that because we're all human. But if you're going to go find some real dollars, you're going to have to go to the healthcare budget to find it, and the window's closing on that. Or you definitely, and you're not going to get it all from there, you definitely going to have to furlough or cut people. And you have to start with the police, the fire, and the sanitation workers, because that's about 2/3, if not more, of the budget. So believe me, I feel that way. I don't want to raise taxes either. But all I can see right now, and I'm a financial advisor, I've looked at this thing upward, downward, sideways, and this is the best thing I think that we can do going forward. And if we do get monies from local government, from the feds, and we don't use that money to restore the lost revenue back to the taxpayers, then yeah, I'm gonna be saying that there've been some untruthful people in this process, because but I don't think that's the case. I think everybody's gonna be true to form and true to their integrity and give that money back if the legal capacity is there to do it. And if the legal capacity isn't there to do it, then we may need to find another way to do it, but certainly give it back to the loss so we can reduce the taxes on the millage side. But so, I mean, you're hearing it a couple of times, but it's not because we want to do this. Actually, it makes it easier for whatever opponent that's going to run against you. But if my opponent wants to run against me, whoever that is, because I didn't want to cut policemen, fire, or sanitation, I welcome that debate. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say to Councilmember Del Chapo, I really appreciate the fact that you've put it out there, your reservations about the way that we're going to have to balance this budget by raising revenues from our citizens and our business owners. And I know that that's painful philosophically, and I know that it's going to be painful to the people who end up, paying us more on an annual basis. But honestly, the way that I can be peaceful about this right now is we live in a community that relies on a trickle-down economy. It'd be different if we were in the middle of nowhere and we could tighten our belts and ask our citizens to sacrifice and not have the services that they have come to know and love from us, and really have the kind of revenue that people had in the Depression, where they were bartering chickens and emptying each other's trash and things like that. I think that could be a very enlarging and exhilarating process for citizens in a community that did not get 55% of its annual revenue from outsiders, essentially. When you talk about fees and sales tax, we have the benefit, but also the responsibility of having a city that is going to be desirable for people to come and give us that 55 cents on every dollar. If we do not have the functionality that people that want to come and be in Charleston and spend their money and share it with our city's revenue stream, we would not have those people. We would not have the benefit of those 55 cents on every dollar. So I think it is, we're caught between the devil and the deep blue sea on that. We can't afford to stop doing the things that are going to bring our revenue back in Charleston. At the same time, we're going to have to ask our citizens to go along with that philosophy of, do we want to be Charleston that has a robust future in the economy? We're in a location crunch compared to some of the other tri-county areas that can entice manufacturing, still have the luxury of turning fields into warehouses and shipping them to the port and all the things we read about in the business section every day. We're really in a constrained environment geographically in the city boundaries. You have Kane Hoy, council member, and God bless you on that. I can't imagine what it's going to be like to represent that kind of growth. but we know it's all residential, and residential does not cover the costs. We have to have a variety of revenue streams, and our only one, until, you know, something happens to Charleston and it blows up and starts all over again, all we have here are the people who want to come here and spend their money. So we have got to create a city that is attractive to people from the outside. And that means the functions that in other places in the middle of nowhere, like I said, would consider expendable for a couple of years. Parks, cultural, recreation, all the things that allow that create the valuable property that people want to spend a little extra to live in the city because they know they get the kind of city services that we're known for. So that's how I can be peaceful. We're all going to be in this together, but we've got to keep Charleston afloat economically. And the only way to do that is to keep our economy going in the same way that it's been for the last 20 years. Thank God we've had that opportunity. And I do think we should look more strategically about attractive public properties, Councilmember Griffin. But to be honest, we have kicked the can down on deferred maintenance to some of those, the two that you just said, that I'm not sure that they would go for top dollar at this point in time until we spend money to put them back into the kind of shape that would make them attractive to the kind of investment dollars that we would consider to be fair for the locations and the functions of those two places. So we've got to spend some money to make some money on those types of buildings and investment properties. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, council member. All right, so Amy has quite a bit more actually in her presentation. So I appreciate everyone's comments. I take them to heart. And if it's okay with y'all, we'll proceed with the rest of the presentation and wrap up with any additional comments and questions after that, and then see if y'all want to get together again to drill down any more on what I call the expense side. Amy?
Okay, so the tourism draft budgets. This is the accommodations. This is state accommodations tax. So you can see the 2020 original budget and then the amended budget 2021 proposed. Revenues are significantly lower than they were before. All of those expenses are things that we're required to do. They're bond payments and things like that, agreements that we have. So those are the expenses for state accommodations tax. We had no applications this year for that funding, knowing that the revenues would not support us being able to give it to any organizations. And we are using a little bit of fund balance for that as well. So any questions on the state accommodations? And I just want to mention too, we did have the advisory committee meeting yesterday. I don't know, Councilmember Gregg, if you want to say anything about that, but.
I was about to, Amy.
Sure.
We did review the 2020 amendments as well as the 2021 proposal, and we voted to accept it unanimously.
Any questions on that?
Nope.
Okay. Next is our municipal accommodations tax. Municipal accommodations is a 50-50, 1% capital improvements, 1% property tax relief. As you can see, that's a 2020 proposed budget versus what we're proposing for 2021. Again, revenues are significantly less in 2021. We are having to use $1.5 million in fund balance. We're transferring 3.3 million into the general fund. Typically, as you can see, last year we only did about 2 million. That's typically what we do for transfers into the general fund. We had to use a little bit more in municipal accommodations this year to transfer into the general fund because the hospitality fee fund cannot support that. So we're using more fund balance to transfer into the general fund to help the general fund. And then we have reserve for low battery to continue that project. And the other is the debt payment for our energy performance bond. Any questions on that? Okay. Hospitality fee fund, I broke this up into 3 separate slides because it's a big budget. This is the revenue. You see the 2020 approved, what we amended it to, and our proposed for 2021. We are having to use $2.5 million in fund balance. And the reserves is just the money that we've held for projects. These are all the operating expenditures that we pay out of this fund. Entertainment district, there are agreements for the International African American Museum, the Family Circle Cup, which is now really Volvo, Gilliard Management Corporation, some debt, operating costs for the Gilliard, the $1 million contribution to the Mother Emanuel Memorial, because we had that 2-year commitment. We did the $1 million this year in 2020, another $1 million for 2021, and then the renovation to the Volvo Tennis Center. And then debt service as well. Well, we cannot, that's the other part. We cannot pay the revenue bond out of the hospitality fee. So we're paying that out of state accommodations. And then transfers to the general fund. Usually we do about 5.3 million. We're only able to do 3.8. And then these are all the other transfers out that we have for projects and such. Any questions on that? So this, just to give you an idea of how this is affecting the general fund, we're about $2.1 million less than we normally can transfer into the general fund from our tourism related revenues. So that was another hit to the general fund.
So Amy, this fee income that you've gone over, year over year, we down approximately what percent, you think?
I'm sorry, can you say that?
Year over year from, let's say from 19 to now, percentage wise, how much less in revenue we collect, you're projecting than we did even in 2019?
So you can see here on this slide, Councilmember Waring, our 2020 budget was about $29.4 million for all of those. We're doing, so it's about half, a little bit less than half. For our 2021 estimate is 15.7.
So we're kind of fading out, but we about approximately 45 to 50% down in revenue.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Any questions on those budgets? So we will present those to you all at the first meeting in December as well for approval. And then this is just the additional information that I was asked to give to everybody. Some of the council members asked, the ad hoc committee had asked for this because we have non-general fund programs that a lot of people look at our general fund and they think that we're not funding certain programs or initiatives very well because they're looking at the general fund budget, but actually we have other funds. We have special revenue funds, we have capital improvement funds that actually fund a lot of our initiatives. So we're going to kind of go through those, especially for affordable housing. So you'll see in the 2021 general fund draft budget, it includes only $1 million for housing and community development, which doesn't seem like it's very much, but it's just the general fund portion. Most of housing and community development is accounted for in our special revenue funds. So in the special revenue funds, which if you look at our CAFR, you can see all of these funds in the CAFR. So anybody can look this up. Fee in lieu for affordable housing. We collected since 2017, $7.9 million. We've purchased several properties with the intent to create affordable housing on those parcels. We've partnered with the Charleston Housing Authority to develop approximately 155 units of combined rental, owner occupied and workforce housing, ranging from 30% to 150% AMI. We utilize the funding for the construction of 7 houses in Ashleyville, Maryville area, and also construction of 3 homes, which were the Katrina cottages. And just so you know, the proceeds from the sale of those homes go right back into the fee in lieu. So we are continually putting that back in to fee in lieu for more affordable housing projects.
Amy, just some wordsmithing. The 7 houses in Maryville, Asheville. Can you tweak that? Can you tweak that to say owner occupied houses? Okay, good. Thank you.
Sure. We also transfer $300,000 annually into the general, or from the general fund from franchise fees into the Affordable Housing and Rehabilitation Special Revenue Fund. I think we've been doing that since 2015 or 2016. We've purchased 10 to 12 townhomes for persons earning 120% AMI with those funds. We had the LDC settlement, which was around 22.8 million. The city received $10 million in those settlement funds. We have awarded forgivable loans and repayable loans. Both obviously have criteria that needs to be met. And we've partnered with the Charleston Redevelopment Corporation to administer those funds. So far, $3 million was awarded to an organization to purchase land that will be used to produce 48 affordable units, and 1.3 was loaned to an organization that will produce 75 affordable units. The remaining amount stayed with the LDC. 9.2 is restricted to a perpetual revolving loan fund for the development of affordable housing within the city of Charleston. And then the remaining 3.6 is restricted to use within the city of Charleston for purposes consistent with LDC's mission. We procured a $5.5 million general obligation bond anticipation note this year. That was in lieu of the full $20 million bond that we will be getting in, I think, the first quarter of 2021. $4 million of that was utilized to purchase an abandoned school that will be converted to 88 units for seniors earning 80% and below of AMI. And then, like I said, we're going to work on getting the full $20 million bond at the beginning of 2021. And Housing and Community Development also receives HUD, CDBG, home, and HOPWA grants annually as well. So in total, if you look at all of that, that's $51 million for specifically for affordable housing.
I understand that's not all in 1 year, but that it's over about a 2 or 3 year period, you know, that we've been working on all these efforts. But I think it was a couple of council members had asked at our last meeting, because of the fact that some folks didn't think we were doing much on initiatives like this. And if you look at the general fund, it does look like that way. It looked that way. And that's why we just wanted to do a little education about all the other funding sources and initiatives we have going. Councilmember Waring.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you so much, Amy and Mayor, for pulling this together. But believe it or not, we're doing so much, we're still missing out on some things. For example, the efforts to clean up what was Tent City. I'm sure that's not factored in here somewhere. And I forget, Mayor, help me out on this. It was a place we all brought that to enable challenge people is to have a place to go and shower and
navigation center.
Yeah, navigation center. That's not in here. And
you're right.
In the paper this morning, as a matter of fact, the AT&T project started up. That's going to help the drainage project through West Oak Forest come on, which is a $10 million project. I'm talking about our share is 10 million, not to mention AT&T's portion. They're moving a fiber optic cable, putting it deeper so we can have finish the gravity flow drainage system up in there right now, where water goes into some people's homes during heavy rain events. That's through a predominantly African American neighborhood. So those dollars should be those professors at the College of Charleston and others who joined in raised a tremendous issue. And if we're only $300,000 that we're doing, we all should be ashamed. But that's just not the case. We know it, but they don't. So as our city goes through and comes up with these examples, and maybe we can break it out by year, but there are other council members on here that will think of something that I didn't think of. I'm sure Ms. Jackson can think of something I didn't think of. Councilman Gregory and Mitchell, areas that where this city is really socially responsible, frankly, to all communities when it kind of comes to our spending. So if these professors were to look at what we're doing, they may be able to look at it and say, well, have you thought about doing this? That would be accretive to the process. Maybe other cities will see it in North Charleston and say, you know, we're going to try to one up you. And maybe Mount Pleasant can learn from it as well, which helps the region. So I appreciate them raising the question of defund the police so we can do, you know, these socially responsible initiatives. Turns out we're doing way more than 5 million annually, and have been doing more than 5 million for several years now. I don't know whether we've been doing it for 40 years, but we've been doing it for the last, I would say 4, 5, 6 years. So anyway, thank you, Amy, for pulling this together. And the leveraging that took place, just like the 4 million that went towards to buy the Archer School, she has since gone to the LDC and pulled in additional revenues that's going to enable those 88 units in the area that's really needed most. So so thank you so much. And given the gravity of what all you have to do, pull this information out. But yeah, we need to let the people know.
What is you, please?
Thank you. Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I really love that Councilmember Waring made big points about the leveraging opportunities. I mean, that is what housing and community development does. You use money that comes directly from government or from a source that's dedicated to the goals of those values. And then you're able to jumpstart the opportunities that other equity and investors and community benefit loan institutions can take advantage of. So it's like you're putting in a little bit to gain a whole lot more. And I do think that that's a lost message on many people in our community. It certainly was something that was very disappointing in the latest referendum, where people really didn't appreciate that by the county having that little nest egg of funding, they were going to be able to leverage probably $1 billion or more by the time they would have taken out a bond debt and then brought in investors who would have actually built properties that would use private money. So I do feel like we have a responsibility to continue to educate our citizens about the value of those sorts of seed money opportunities.
Thank you. Amy? Oh, Councilmember Gregory?
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on Councilman Waring and Councilwoman Jackson. I think that we have leveraged our community development block grant dollars and home dollars over the years to almost $500 million in investments. I think that story needs to be told. And in terms of the thousands, literally thousands of affordable housing units that $500 million created throughout our city. Not only do we need to educate the public, but I think we need to educate each other because if people are not on the community development committee or other committees, they're not aware of it. And I think it's important for us as councilmen, when questions are raised about what kind of social, affordable housing, things that the city's been involved in, I think we need to be able to tell that story. And knowledge is power, because I don't think that the citizens really realize the kind of investment this city has put in over the years in affordability, period. And not to talk about utility assistance, okay, that also comes from the community development block grant programs. Rental assistance, okay, in some cases it comes from community development block grant. And while that's being administered by another entity, again, these are things that I think that the public needs to know. They need to know about the emergency shelter program. that is also being administered by the city. And again, the homeless piece that Councilman Waring talked about. So again, I think we need to really tell our story in terms of the kind of efforts that our city has been involved in over the years in social program realm.
I hate to jump in a second time, but if you would allow, even in Parks and Recreation, Higgins Pier, Mr. Mayor, was what, a $700,000 linear at the end of the bikeway, linear park into the Ashley River. Beautiful, primarily African American area. Carl Richardson Park, which is 2.4 million in a former African American township over there. All those areas, you know, need to be there. MLK swimming pool on the east side of town. The South Carolina State University building that's rounding the curve that's on the old bridge site. That's going to be, again, community-oriented buildings over there. The city gave the land, and certainly that building is now rounding finished, by the way. Anybody hadn't been over there, please go take a look. And then we have our allied situation where CWS paid 1.8 million or 1.85 million to bring the water and the sewer to Grace Homes. That's normally a development cost, but because it was affordable housing, that infrastructure was paid by our sister agency, so to speak. So we've got a good story to tell. It's just that we're so busy looking forward. Sometimes, you know, you don't look in the rearview mirror, but on this one, we need to look in the rearview mirror and share that information with all that is willing to listen. Let's put it like that. Thank you.
So thank you. And just a little bit more along those lines, and then we'll wrap up. Amy?
So Councilmember Waring, I've just fast forwarded a little bit, and I didn't highlight specific projects like you just did, but you know, in our capital improvement funds, we have all of our parks, our public safety buildings, and other public buildings are accounted for in those funds. And currently our 5-year capital improvement plan has $147.1 million included for those types of projects. And then also the drainage fund, which is a capital improvement fund, is 142.9 million dedicated to drainage infrastructure projects in our 5-year capital improvement plan. And you know, those are funded by a combination of 4 mills and property taxes, various grants, and we also give 2% of business license fees is dedicated to that annually as well. So right now, just the 5-year capital improvement plan is $290 million. I just want to highlight that as well. And I think I mentioned too, you know, we have that Open Gov project, which we will have storyboards. So all of this we can tell really great stories in that project and have that online for our citizens as well. So that's another project we're working on. And then oops, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I'll tell you something else. You know, the Gilliard Center has brought, I think, over 30,000 students, 70% free and reduced lunch, and to see world-class entertainment and artisan over the years. And the city owns the Gilliard. So, again, that needs to be part of this too.
Lots of investments, including a new forensic center out West Ashley that will help our police department be the finest in the state, continue to be the finest in the state. New recreation center being built out on Daniel Island, about to be completed. So all of these kinds of investments, the way they get funded, don't show up in our general fund budget. And hence, again, the point is just to share that we are addressing many needs of our city, you know, outside of the regular general fund budget. Any other questions or comments? And thanks for everyone's patience. I know this is a tough nut, a Hobson's choice, a difficult year, again, where on multiple fronts, on fees and business license, hospitality, hospitality accommodations fees, all have been cut this year due to the impact of COVID-19, and with the requirement and the responsibility to to balance our budget. This is, after many months of review, this is a budget that our ad hoc budget committee advocated for and agreed with, and we bring it to you. Is it perfect? No. We welcome any comments, any suggestions you may have. Amy will share the detail line by line budget item on the expense side for you to review. If you desire, we can have another workshop meeting just to focus on that, since that seemed to be a topic of some conversation here today. Glad to do that, or we could just limit it to those non-ad hoc committee members if y'all would like to have a kind of special workshop session to review those. So any other questions or comments today? Councilmember Griffin.
Is there any way to get that on the schedule, with that line up with our next city council meeting on Tuesday?
We'll have to check everybody's schedule, but I'd be happy to do that.
I mean, we could just have it right before council, before Ways and Means. I don't know what the schedule looks like for next week, but that seems to me to be the easiest way. I'd like a few more days to chew on this and have one more crack at it before we start the actual voting process, if possible.
Right. Well, and remember that we won't be presenting this budget formally until December 1st meeting. So certainly before then, we'll have the
right. But after next Tuesday is Thanksgiving, so it's going to be really tough to do it if we don't do it by Tuesday.
Right.
Say something, because then the following week is December 1st, which is the first reading of the budget. So we almost would have to do it next week.
And Mr. Mayor, we don't have any committee meetings scheduled for next Tuesday before Ways and Means. So that time is open. If y'all would like to do something like that then.
Okay. Does that meet the
3 o'clock or so?